For nearly 2 decades, Terry Irwin has been seen as the unbreakable center of one of the world's most beloved families. After the sudden loss of Steve Irwin, she became more than a widow. She became a protector, a leader, and the emotional backbone holding together a legacy watched by millions. The world admired her strength, but behind closed doors, that strength came at a cost. Raising 2 children under constant public scrutiny while preserving her late husband's mission meant Terry rarely allowed herself space to grieve. Every decision she made carried the weight of history, expectation, and survival. And now, years later, as her son Robert steps into adulthood, that buried grief has resurfaced in a new form. Not through tragedy, but through change. A change that has left Terry quietly questioning whether the world she fought to protect for her children is now shaping them in ways she never anticipated. Before the Irwin name became a global symbol of wildlife conservation, Terry Irwin lived a very different life. Raised in Eugene, Oregon, she was shaped by compassion, curiosity, and a deep respect for animals. Long before cameras followed her every move, she founded Cougar Country, a wildlife rehabilitation center dedicated to rescuing injured predators most people feared. Her work was quiet, hands-on, and deeply personal. Terry's identity wasn't built around fame or spectacle. It was built around care, patience, and responsibility. That grounding would later become essential when her life changed forever. In 1991, a single visit to a small reptile park in Australia altered her trajectory. Meeting Steve Irwin wasn't just a romantic turning point. It was the moment 2 lives, driven by the same purpose, merged into something far bigger than either of them imagined. Steve and Terry's connection was immediate and intense, rooted in shared values rather than celebrity ambition. Together, they transformed Australia Zoo into a global platform for conservation. But their time as a family was painfully short. When Steve died in 2006, Terry was thrust into a reality she had never prepared for. Overnight, she became a single mother raising 2 children in the shadow of a global icon. There was no pause, no moment to fall apart. Cameras kept rolling. The world kept watching. Terry later described those early years as living inside a fog, functioning without truly feeling. Her grief was private, but her responsibility was public. She wasn't just raising Bindi and Robert. She was preserving a legacy millions believed belonged to them all. For Robert Irwin, life began in the most unusual way imaginable. His childhood playground wasn't a backyard. It was Australia Zoo. His earliest memories were shaped by animal calls, camera crews, and a father the world adored. But when Steve died, Robert was only 2 years old. He grew up knowing his father not through memories, but through footage, stories, and expectations. As he aged, the comparisons became unavoidable. Viewers saw Steve's grin in Robert's smile, his curiosity in Robert's questions, his fearlessness mirrored in a young boy handling reptiles on television. To audiences, it felt comforting. To Robert, it quietly defined him before he could define himself. Terry worked tirelessly to shield her children from the pressure of being the next Irwins, but total protection was impossible. By the time Robert reached his teens, he was already a global figure. Television appearances, documentaries, and conservation projects placed him firmly in the spotlight. Each success reinforced the same narrative. Robert was Steve reborn. While meant as praise, it created an unspoken challenge. How do you honor a legacy without disappearing inside it? Terry noticed the conflict early. She saw how deeply Robert wanted to make his father proud while also craving space to grow into someone distinct. That emotional balancing act intensified as he approached adulthood, and the world's expectations only grew louder. As Robert matured, his public image evolved from child prodigy to polished young conservationist. His wildlife photography earned international recognition, showcasing a quieter, more introspective side of his personality. To fans, it was proof that the Irwin legacy was thriving. But to those closest to him, it revealed something more complicated. Robert's schedule became relentless. Travel, media appearances, conservation work, and public obligations left little room for rest or self-reflection. He was admired everywhere, yet rarely unseen. Terry began to sense exhaustion behind his enthusiasm. The smiles remained, but the ease behind them felt strained. It was subtle, but unmistakable to a mother who had already watched the world take too much from her family once before. By the early 2020s, Robert's personal life began attracting the same attention as his professional work. His relationship with Rory Bucky drew intense media interest, turning a private romance into public speculation. When the relationship ended in early 2024, commentary followed immediately. For Robert, the breakup was personal. For the internet, it was content. Terry saw this as another reminder of how little room her son had to experience normal milestones without scrutiny. Heartbreak, growth, and self-discovery were unfolding under a magnifying glass. It wasn't scandal, but it was pressure. And pressure, when constant, leaves marks that success alone cannot erase. Later that year, rumors emerged about Robert's growing closeness to a former Australia Zoo staff member. Once again, attention shifted from his work to his personal choices. Observers noticed that Robert became more guarded, sharing less of himself publicly. Interviews grew measured. His energy felt different. To fans, this appeared like maturity. To Terry, it felt like emotional self-protection. She recognized the signs. She had seen what relentless public expectation could do to a person's spirit. The concern wasn't about who Robert was becoming, but about how much of himself he felt he needed to hide to survive. The Mohat truly surprised the public came with Robert's Bonds campaign. The images were bold, confident, and deliberately different from the family-friendly image the Irwins had cultivated for decades. Reactions were instant and divided. Some celebrated his confidence. Others questioned the direction. Terry's response, according to insiders, was layered. She felt pride in her son's confidence, but also uncertainty. This wasn't about modesty or rebellion. It was about identity. Robert wasn't rejecting his upbringing. He was signaling that he needed space to define himself beyond conservation alone. That realization, while understandable, stirred emotions Terry hadn't expected to face. Physically, Robert appeared transformed. Leaner, stronger, more sculpted. His involvement in fitness branding sparked conversations about image and influence. But beneath the surface, the transformation was emotional. He was stepping into autonomy. For Terry, this shift was bittersweet. She understood that growth requires distance, but distance felt dangerous after everything she had already lost. The Irwin family's closeness had been a source of healing. Letting go, even slightly, reopened old wounds she thought time had closed. Living together at Australia Zoo had always symbolized unity, resilience, and shared purpose. Yet as Robert entered his 20s, whispers began that such closeness might now be limiting rather than nurturing. Friends suggested independence was necessary. Terry didn't disagree, but emotionally she struggled. Robert wasn't just her son. He was a living connection to Steve. Watching him pull away, even naturally, felt like losing another piece of the past. It wasn't control she feared losing. It was connection. Professionally, Robert's success only added complexity. His role co-hosting I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in 2024 expanded his public identity beyond wildlife conservation. The opportunity validated his talent and versatility. Terry was proud, deeply proud. But success also meant choices. New industries, new audiences, new expectations. Robert now had the freedom to redefine what being an Irwin meant. That freedom, while empowering, came with uncertainty. And uncertainty is often harder to face than failure. The emotional turning point wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Robert spoke about wanting to find his own path. To most, it sounded reasonable. To Terry, it echoed something far heavier. She realized that preserving Steve's mission had become intertwined with her identity as a mother. Letting Robert step away felt like stepping into unfamiliar emotional territory. She knew this wasn't rejection. It was evolution. But evolution still requires letting go of what once felt essential. Terry began questioning whether the legacy she protected had unintentionally become a weight. Steve never intended his passion to imprison his children. Yet the world's expectations had slowly built invisible walls around Robert. Terry had seen other public figures collapse under similar pressure. The fear wasn't that Robert would fail. It was that he would lose himself trying not to disappoint anyone. Grief doesn't disappear. It transforms. Terry's grief resurfaced not as loss, but as fear. Fear of watching her son navigate a world that doesn't offer the same kindness it demands. fear of not recognizing the future version of the boy she once carried through heartbreak. These emotions weren't public statements. They were private moments, quiet tears, lingering thoughts late at night. And yet there is strength in this story. Terry has always adapted. She adapted after loss, after responsibility, after unimaginable change. Supporting Robert now requires a different kind of strength, one that allows distance without disconnection, one that trusts growth without control. That transition is rarely visible, but it is deeply human. Robert, for his part, has never denied his roots. His work still reflects compassion, curiosity, and respect for wildlife. The difference is expression. His generation communicates differently, builds identity differently. The legacy hasn't vanished. It's evolving. And evolution, by nature, looks unfamiliar before it feels right. The question surrounding Robert's transformation isn't whether he is drifting away. It's whether the world is willing to let him be more than a symbol, more than a continuation, more than a reminder of a man he barely knew. Robert deserves the space to be human, flawed, curious, and changing. For Terry, accepting that truth doesn't erase the pain, but it reframes it. Her role is no longer to protect a legacy alone. It's to trust that the values she instilled will guide her son wherever he goes. That trust is an act of love as profound as anything she's done before. In the end, this story isn't about loss or rebellion. It's about growth under extraordinary circumstances, about a mother learning to release control after years of holding everything together, and about a young man stepping out of a shadow, not to escape it, but to finally see himself clearly. What do you think? Is Robert Irwin simply becoming who he was always meant to be, or is the weight of legacy reshaping him in unexpected ways? Share your thoughts, and if you found this story meaningful, stay connected for more in-depth documentaries like this one.